Thanks very much. Good morning. I just realized, if anyone here spends time in New York City and rides the subway, you'll recognize that voice that we use. It's Charlie Pellet. He's the voice of the New York City subway and also on Bloomberg Radio. So he's the one who tells you the doors are opening and closing. So welcome, and thanks so much for coming. We're going to have a great day today. This is the Disruptive Threats and Opportunities, the Future of ETFs conference sponsored by Vanguard. Bloomberg is working with them. I'm Matt Miller. I also work for Bloomberg. If you watch Bloomberg television in the mornings, in the European mornings, you'll see my show. It's the European Market Open show from 8:30 to 10 on the continent. But it's great to be able to take some time to do this. I did the last one in Frankfurt. We did them in 4 cities now, and I think people get a lot out of these conferences, and it's really great to get so much in such a short period of time. You don't have to sit through lunch and fall asleep in the afternoon sessions. Just want to quickly touch on the topics that we'll be discussing. Obviously, ETFs is the theme. There's been a lot of, it's interesting for me because I just moved here to Berlin from New York, and I've been reporting in the US for the last decade. So for us, ETFs are kind of like the way we follow the markets in New York. Everybody, if you're looking at what's happening in financials, for example, you look at the XLF ETF. If you want to know what's going on in safe haven assets, you look at GLD. We talk about the SPYs and the triple Qs, and everything in the U.S. really centers, in U.S. investing really centers in some ways around ETFs. So it was surprising to me when I moved here and found that a lot of people don't know that much about ETFs, or you don't have these sort of main staples. They are getting a lot bigger. And a lot of that's due to MiFID II. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the concerns, the fears about using ETFs, and whether there's a herd mentality developing as all the millennials start to pile into these with their apps. And we'll talk about what the next products will be, where the growth in the industry can come from. So let me just remind you, everything that we say on stage today is on the record. You can take notes. You can use it in your own research if you like. You can take pictures. You can post them on Instagram or Twitter. There's some hashtags that we're using. Hashtag Future of ETFs and hashtag Vanguard Europe are 2 of those that we're using from this conference. You can follow our Twitter feed at Bloomberg Live as well. If you want to keep up with this. And of course, we're streaming this live on the Bloomberg terminal, so people can watch this and watch it from the website, Bloomberg.com as well. So with that out of the way, let me welcome to stage Vanguard Managing Director for Europe, Sean Hagerty.
Morning, everyone. And thanks for attending the conference, and thanks to Bloomberg for hosting it. It's good to know we have all these Twitter handles, and you can take photography. I'm pretty comfortable you won't be taking any photos of me anytime soon, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I'm excited to be here in Zurich, in what is a very important country and a very important city in the financial ecosystem in Europe. And Vanguard's proud to be a sponsor, primarily because we think ETFs are a very important product and a very important topic for us to talk about. And we think today's conference comes at a perfect time. First, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the first ETF being launched. So we're 25 years in, and yet it feels like we're very new to the game. And there's a lot going on in the industry right now. The tectonic plates are shifting underneath our feet, and there are very significant amounts of assets moving around the industry from category to category, product to product. And I want to talk about 2 disruptive forces that we think are causing some of the secular change that we're experiencing in the industry today. Both of the forces, which is the rise of indexing and the redefinition of advice, actually favor ETFs to become the global investment vehicle of choice. And ETFs are positioned not only to capitalize on these changes, but in fact to propel the disruptions. Let's talk about why. First, it's the disruption being caused by the rise of indexing. And the first thing you have to know about this is that we don't really think this is because of the superiority of indexing necessarily. What we think is that it is a failure of active, that index funds of ETFs have won because active has failed to adapt. As you all well know, active management has been a zero-sum game from the beginning as it is today. Where there's a winner, there has to be a loser. Excess return must be confiscated from someone else. And 30 years ago, this was a lot easier because there were professional asset managers, and the market was still made up of a significant number of amateur investors who were really easy prey for the wolves to prey on the sheep. But the sheep got smart over time, and they hired asset managers. So today, 70–80% of the assets in the marketplace are managed professionally. So today, it's CFA against CFA, it's Bloomberg terminal against Bloomberg terminal. The zero-sum game is much tougher. With that heightened competition, the distribution of excess returns for active portfolios has dropped by 60%. There's just not as much alpha in the industry today as there was in the past. Unfortunately, fees have not followed suit. The average expense ratio of an active fund is still well over 100 basis points. That means a PM has to get 100 basis points over their benchmark every year just to be better than the benchmark and their peers in the index industry. It's a very tough task. So while skilled managers may find excess return, they quickly swamp it with their high fees, and their net returns sink below that of the index. And in fact, in Europe, 90% of active equity funds and 93% of active fixed income funds have underperformed their benchmark over the past 15 years. Investors are smart, and their assets have followed. Over the last decade, index assets in Europe have grown at a compound annual growth rate of 16% compared to 5% for active funds. So this is one of the things that's causing a big shift in assets. ETFs are fueling a large part of this. In ETFs in Europe, we've seen a 19% compound annual growth rate over the past 10 years. And we see no sign of that letting up. In fact, we think that ETFs are really still just getting started, even though we've already experienced a 19% growth rate over the past 10 years. To compete with the index, active managers would need to dramatically lower their fees. And honestly, we don't see any signs of that. So we think index funds will continue to outperform active. Adding to their advantages market expectations, we think what we're facing is in the next 10 years is likely a lower return environment. Vanguard's 10-year nominal return outlook for a global 60 equity, 40 balanced portfolio could be as low as 3 to 5%. Compare it with the historical average looking back 10 years of 8.5%. In this kind of a low return environment, costs matter even more. The average active portfolio today chews up 1 to 2% of that expected return in a year. Compound that over 10 years and you have a real shortfall. It's just another reason why index and ETFs will continue to be popular. Let me shift to the second disruption, the redefinition of advice. Traditionally, advisors and distributors dealing with clients look to add value by understanding their clients' wealth goals, setting up a tax-efficient portfolio composed of fund managers that they believe they were choosing to actually outperform the market. Compensation is driven by commissions and retrocessions, often misunderstood by the average investor. In the US, as well as several other markets, that model is changing rapidly. Post-GFC, advisors realized that active managers have been too inconsistent to build their business on. In addition, today, technology can easily set up the proper diversified portfolio to match someone's goals, rebalance regularly, and manage tax efficiently, better, faster, and cheaper, putting even more downward pressure on fees. So you have technology, you have the inability to actually select active managers and rotate them appropriately. So it's moving the advisor towards a fee-based model where the advisor is more of a financial planner and less of a portfolio manager. Concurrently, significant regulatory pressure in many markets is driving increased fee transparency. As a result of this, advisors are moving more and more to a fee-based model. And I'll just give you some example in the US, which we think is a bit of a precursor for Europe. But in 2013, not that long ago, US commissions accounted for 45% of advisor compensation. That number declined dramatically in 2016 to 32%. And we estimate that this year that number will be 23%. So more than 3/4 of advisor fees in the US will be fee-based this year. Of course, this transformation is happening in some markets faster than others. In those markets where a few distributors have a chokehold on the market and still insist on conflict-laden commissions and retrocessions to pay for advice, the change will be slower, and we have seen it slower in many markets in Europe. But fortunately, the regulatory trend and the waking up of consumers, because they're reading journalists who are writing about this today, it's toward a better transparency. matching the fee for advice with a service provider rather than burying cost inside of a product. The move towards transparent fee-based advice models will drive an even greater adoption of ETFs in the future. We've seen it happen in the US, we're seeing it happen here today. As indexing rises and the world of advice is redefined, ETFs are positioned to become the global investment vehicle of choice. ETFs are low-cost, versatile vehicles that give you diversified direct market exposure. They will outperform active products. They fit well in a fee-based model. They're ideal building blocks for people who are doing a lot of different things in their portfolios, and they're just getting started. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.